Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to the FutureSwell YouTube channel. My name is Joe Giglio. I'm a marine biologist, and I'll be the host of today's episode. So let's dive right in. So usually I'm the guy who's reacting to all those crazy ocean things in our videos. Like last month, I reacted to a bunch of orca attacks, which you can see right here. But today I thought I would switch it up a little bit and answer some of those burning questions that a lot of you have been commenting on our videos, and a lot of you guys probably just want to know about marine biology and what it takes to be a marine biologist. So today I've compiled 15 of the most asked questions on all of our channels and on the internet to answer today for you guys as a marine biologist. At number one, why did you get into marine biology? So for every marine biologist, it's definitely a different kind of story. And for me, it was honestly started when I was just a little kid watching Free Willy. Like, I always wanted to be that little kid where the whale like jumps over him. And I think a lot of people are inspired by movies and TV shows, really discovering like little bits of the ocean that really inspire them to kind of pursue it as a career. Second question, what part in marine biology do you specialize in and why so? This is also a really good question for a lot of marine biologists out there. I personally have worked in a lot of different areas of marine biology. I have always been interested in whales and dolphins, and so that's where I predominantly want to spend my time working. But I've worked with crabs, fish, sea urchins, seaweed, waves, sediment, jellyfish, turtles, monk seals. There's just so many opportunities in marine biology. How was studying to become a marine biologist like? So studying for marine biology is difficult, okay? It's not easy. You do have to go through a lot of schooling, especially if you want to work in like a lot of those higher up positions that actually pay you a living wage. I went to undergrad, so I got a bachelor's degree in marine biology where I did 4 years of school. And you do a lot of math, a lot of science. I think you go up to like calculus 2, and you do like biochem, oceanography, organic chemistry. And then I continued after that, and I went on to a master's degree where I actually specialized a little bit more into marine science and really started doing more applicable things and getting like internships and working like actually in the field with policy and government. Number 4, what do you think is the biggest threat to marine life or the ocean as a whole? I would say the biggest threat to marine life is probably overfishing. There's so much commercial fishing done in the world that a lot of studies haven't really been able to keep up with. And so especially in the South Pacific and areas where there's just so many fishing industries all competing for the same fish, a lot of the fish are just fished out and then they just move on to the next biggest fish and they just keep working their way down the food chain. Unfortunately, what that does is it just spirals out of control for the entire ecosystem in that region, and then it spills over into other ecosystems throughout the ocean. Over the last 20 years, especially, a lot of scientists have been able to actually publish and work with governments on the data that they've actually been accumulating. And so I think a lot of positive changes are happening in the industry. I don't know if it's too little too late. Number 5, how do you think we could solve this issue? So definitely investing in scientific research, really trying to understand how all of those animals are connected in the ecosystem, and then also doing research like what I used to do as a fisheries researcher here in Hawaii, where you study when a fish is actually mature and correlate that with the size of the fish versus what you're able to catch. So bigger fish are able to have more babies at one time than smaller fish. So you want to make sure that the fish is able to get to a certain size where they can actually get a lot of babies to replenish the population before you just fish them out. So making sure that that catch rate and that catch size is big enough where you still have like those in-between sizes that can still replenish the population. Number 6, are there any species you find more interesting than others? Yes, I think that orcas are one of the most interesting species in the ocean. I think they are the most alike to us as humans. They're apex predators. They have been able to live in every single ocean on the planet. And they're so unique in that they have their own culture, their own way of teaching, their own way of interacting between pods. And I mean, I already told you that I was inspired to be a marine biologist because of Free Willy. So, I mean, obviously I'm going to think that they're the most interesting. Question number 7. Could you tell me about some memorable experiences you've had as a marine biologist? Yeah, so I've worked in a lot of different jobs as a marine biologist, but one of the ones that just comes to my head is the time when I used to work in a necropsy lab, which if you don't know what that means, a necropsy is when you perform like an autopsy on a dead whale or a dead dolphin. They do a lot of studies on that to figure out why it died, how long it lived, like what it was doing. All of these studies can be done on this deceased dolphin. But I remember I was just an intern. This big dead dolphin died and we were going in and necropsying it, which means we're taking out all of its organs. We're like literally dicing it up. We're doing the full study here. And I just remember, like, you have to drain the dolphin of all of its blood. And like, you were like buckets of blood we are just taking and dumping into like the disposal area. This dolphin, I just could not believe that that much blood was inside of this dolphin. I was this deep inside the dolphin, like grabbing its like organs out and then dumping the blood out. Honestly, it's so traumatizing if you're not ready for that. And then I was doing that for like 3 hours, and then I went to my job at a restaurant right after that. And I just remember being like, nobody here knows what I was just doing. And like, you wear a bunch of protective clothes and gear and all this, but you're still diving headfirst into a dolphin. Definitely one of the most memorable experiences I've had, and one that, you know, many marine biologists might not be able to say that they've been able to do that also. Question number 8. What are some new discoveries in marine biology? Marine biologists are making new discoveries every single day in the ocean. It's one of the least explored places on our planet because it's, number one, so difficult to do. And number 2, because it's so big. They say that we know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than our own ocean. But if you guys subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Ripple, we actually put the brand new discoveries happening in the ocean every single month. So I would say subscribe to that. You'll be able to stay up to date on all these crazy marine biology discoveries. Question number 9. How do you stay up to date with the new discoveries in marine biology? Oh, well, there it is. A lot of new discoveries are published in papers, in journals, press releases. So you can find all of that on like scientific websites, but you can also just subscribe to The Ripple, like I just said, and we'll tell you about them. Question number 10. What are some misconceptions in marine biology? I think that a lot of misconceptions include how easy it would be to be a marine biologist, but you forget that you have to do a lot of math, a lot of science, and nowadays you have to do a lot of like computer coding and data analysis and working with AI to like funnel some of your data and some of your findings in. And I think a lot of people, especially when you're younger, you think, oh my gosh, I'm a marine biologist, like a SeaWorld trainer, like that's going to be so fun to do. But it's a lot of work to even get up to anywhere where you could like start actually applying yourself and getting jobs and actually calling yourself as a marine biologist. Question number 11. Could you explain the importance of marine life? So marine life is so important. Predominantly fish species are so important because of our survival. People forget and don't realize that even if you're in a landlocked state, you rely so much on the ocean because all of the marine life in the ocean helps circulate all of the additives from the atmosphere, pollutants, biological life. And if one big piece of that puzzle is removed, the entire thing is at risk of collapsing. Do you know what supplies most of our oxygen? It's not the trees, it's the ocean. Scientists even estimate that about 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe comes directly from biological organic matter decomposing in the ocean. And all of that biological matter is circulated by things like megafauna, fish, bacteria, phytoplankton, even just the currents and the wind. And I just think that that is something that is so important that people just don't realize. And when you pollute and when you have things going into the ocean disrupting all of those biological processes, it will impact you one day if it hasn't not already. Question number 12. What is the worst experience you've had as a marine biologist? Oh my gosh. This one also, I was going to say this one for the most memorable, but this one I try to forget every day. I used to be a crab biologist, and so we would go out and we'd sit on fishermen's boats that were fishing for crabs, and we would tag and recapture a lot of the different crabs that were actually getting thrown back in the ocean. So the ones that were big enough we would keep, and the ones that were small enough we'd tag with a little arm bracelet and we'd throw them back in the water. But I don't know if you know about this. I'm one of those marine biologists that gets seasick, and there's a lot of us out here, which it seems crazy to think about. Like, why would you be a marine biologist if you just get seasick? And honestly, I don't know. And I also am so stubborn because I always pretend like I'm not going to get seasick, and then I always get seasick. And this particular time, we had to travel from Oahu to Molokai, which is across this channel called the Kaiwi Channel, which is one of the most dangerous and unpredictable channels in the world because a lot of the water coming from the northern Pacific and Alaska gets funneled through this really tight, shallow channel. And the waves can be very unpredictable. It could be a lake or it could be like 20-foot swells. It was my fault, okay? I didn't sleep at all. I was hungover because I was drunk partying all night. I forgot to take Dramamine in the morning because I was out. I didn't eat breakfast. It was a horrible storm that night. It was just like red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. I was doing everything possible wrong to not get seasick. And we got into the boat, and honestly, I thought they were going to cancel it that day because it was like a hurricane had just happened or something. And the boat guys were like, oh my gosh, yeah, the captain almost canceled it this morning, but he didn't. So it's going to be rough out there. I was like, oh gosh. Okay, sounds great. Like, it'll be fine. We literally cleared the corner of Oahu and I lost it. I was just throwing up in the back of this boat. And all the other guys were at the front of the boat, like looking forwards. And it's like a 3-hour boat ride. And I'm just dangling off the back, just like, wah, wah. And I remember just looking at Oahu and looking at the island and being like, I want to go back. I want to go back. But I couldn't go back because they're not going to let you off the boat. I ended up being seasick that day for 12 hours. I did not stop getting seasick. The waves were so big. Let me paint this picture. I was sitting on the wall of the boat, and when the boat would tip, I'd be laying in the water, and when it would tip back up this way, I'd be standing straight up and down. That's how big these waves were. And they tried to give me like saltines and crackers and Dramamine, and I would just eat it and then throw it up right away. And then they were like, you know what, just come on over here, try and just pass out. And I think I passed out for maybe 2 hours, and I woke up and I was like, oh, I felt great. I felt like, oh my gosh, because there's always those stories about people, you know, going out to sea and they get over their seasickness eventually. And I thought, I did it. I thought this was it. This is the time when I finally got over it. And they passed me a crab and a clipboard, and I started writing. And immediately, looking at those lines and writing, I just was like, ugh, and I slid back the crab and the clipboard and went right back to the side of the boat. 12 hours. I was seasick. We rolled back into the harbor. My friend picked me up, and we went to Olive Garden. But I will never forget that. It's one of my worst experiences, and I don't ever want to remember it. Question 13. What are your goals as a marine biologist? So long-term as a marine biologist, what I want to do is work in policy. I want to work in the government, working with policymakers and scientists and kind of bridging that gap to actually make science work for the government. Because science doesn't do anything on its own. All that does is it tells you what's happening out there in the world and in the oceans, but it doesn't actually bring any change. That's where policy and governments come into play, because they will take the science and analyze it and make laws and change things that aren't working the best for nature and for conservation. And I want to be that person that bridges those two gaps. Question 14. What are your hopes for marine life in the future? I hope that marine life in the future gets more protection and more understanding than it does now, because I think still a lot of governments and people around the world that are in positions that could actively bring about positive change still don't really acknowledge the importance about marine animals and marine life and how we interact with them. And there's so many ways that humans in the past have negatively impacted the ocean and marine life. And we've come a long way, especially in the last 70 years. But I just think that there's so much more we could do. And I think that it's moving in the right direction, but it needs more people like you watching this to go out there and be an advocate for marine life in your local elections and even in your day-to-day. There's so much that you can do. Last question, question 15. What kind of tools do you use as a marine biologist? So this is different, again, for every marine biologist out there, because there's so many different jobs you can do as a marine biologist. For me, in the past, I've used boats, spear guns, tags. I've used drones. I've used submarines. There's different data collecting devices that you can deploy into the ocean. You can use nets. You can use buckets. You can use lights. You can use scuba gear, masks, fins. There's also tools that you can use to analyze your data. So that's like computer programs. There's a lot of coding platforms. If you're familiar with R, SPSS, GIS, there's so many different mapping tools out there. And recently, a lot of scientists have been utilizing AI to not only aid in their data analysis, but make all of that easier. Another big tool that a lot of marine biologists use is cameras. So if you want to be a marine biologist, you're aspiring to be that, a great way to start is really honing in on some of those skills that you could use, like photography or data analysis, anything coding, like that is where marine biology is moving towards in the future. Well, there you go, you guys. That was my 15 questions with a marine biologist. If you have any more questions that I did not answer today, leave them in the comments because we are always trying to answer the questions that you have for us here at FutureSwell. If you didn't know, a lot of us here at FutureSwell are marine biologists. A lot of us did our masters, went through school. We've worked with so many different marine biologists throughout a lot of our contracts and research that we've done here on Oahu. And we want to just branch out and do even more. So if you're interested in collaborating, you can DM us here on Instagram or leave us a comment here on YouTube. And make sure you follow us and subscribe, like this video. We always want to keep continuing to make more content. And we also want to know what you guys want to see. Till next time, you guys.